Welcome to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, founder of the Motherhood Circle and creator of the Journey into Motherhood program. I'm a mother of two and have had 2 unplanned and unneeded C-sections and am planning my first home and vaginal birth. My own journey has sparked a deep passion to support women to find their own voice and strength to create the pregnancy, birth and motherhood experience you desire. This podcast is for women wanting to learn more about VBACs, especially home births, and for professionals who want to learn more about how to support VBAC home birthing women. Inside, we're going to share women's stories from surgical birth to achieving their vaginal home birth after cesarean. Now let's get started. Hi, Kamal, how are you today?
It's great. A beautiful sunny day today. I'm feeling fantastic.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. You're my very first guest and one of my gorgeous clients as well. And I've been working with you for over a year, but we've known each other longer than that because I met you in your second postpartum. But it's been an absolute pleasure, following your journey. And I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Yeah, no, excited to be here. Bit nervous myself, but yeah.
I think we're both a bit nervous. It being the very first one, so we're kind of nervous together, a little ball of nerves. So we're just going to start off today with you giving a little bit of information and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so where to start? So I guess my name's Kamal and I've got a family of 2 children. My first son will be nearly 3, and my second son is 8 months today, actually. So, we've got a bit of a hands full with 2 kids with different developmental needs, but every day is a new day and exciting. So, and I'm 35 years old, so my journey into motherhood is a little bit later. I was very much career focused with, I work in a school as a counsellor and, I guess, I have also experienced 2 miscarriages in between. So, it's just so nice to be here just finding our way through motherhood and as a family.
And so lovely to have you, and thank you so much for sharing a bit about you. Tell us, I guess we'll start from your first pregnancy. Tell us, how that went and, up until your birth.
Yeah, so my first pregnancy actually was a miscarriage, and then from there I actually found out I did have some health issues to address. So then when I was pregnant with my first son, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, being very cautious, and everything was going along quite smoothly. I was working still full-time, and towards the last couple of months, things started to get a little bit rocky in terms of things were going okay, and then, we found out, a few kind of genetic kind of blood issues, and I ended up having gestational diabetes, which was even a shock to my own personal doctor. And so therefore we had to have more scans and more close monitoring in terms of food, in terms of so towards the end it was a little bit stressful. Myself, I wasn't actually prepared for my pregnancy. I actually was going to be working up until the last 2 weeks, 38 weeks I put in.
Wow.
Thinking that I would get really bored at home. I'm a doula, and if I was at work, and so it ended up being that I never actually had my maternity leave, where I was planning to do all my research and reading. You know, I had gathered things along the way, going to expos and, you know, so kind of preparing for, you know, baby's arrival. But in terms of preparing for birth and life afterwards was non-existent. So it ended up being in that 38-week, work was even having a baby shower for me, and we had to move it because I had a scan to go to. And the scan showed baby was in breech position, and that was the first time ever that I had, you know, been aware of that. Prior to that, you know, it was, you know, normal birth. It was, you know, this water birth. You know, that was the ideal. And so when I saw the doctor the next day, they were talking about inducing me, and I just kind of raised the question about, oh, what about it being in breech position? And so she actually had to do another check because she didn't really, from her, you know, physical examination, she didn't see that it was in breech position, but with another little scan, she found out it was breech, and then had to speak to her senior doctor. And it was just within moments, it was kind of like, you need to have steroids today, tomorrow, and baby needs to come out on Friday, which was, you know, essentially my last day of work.
So when they were recommending the induction, what was the recommendation for the induction for?
I believe it's because, you know, I was already 38 weeks, and with gestational diabetes, the risk factor of the baby being, I guess, larger, which the scans didn't actually show, but, you know, they were always, and I think I didn't have exactly enough fluid around the baby. So I did ask if we could turn the baby, because like I had not done any research, and it was just put on the spot, and it was just something I had heard of. And she asked her senior, and because of not enough fluid, they said it would not be advisable. At that point in time, I was a mess, complete mess. You know, luckily I had my husband with me, and we requested for a second opinion, and we were at the hospital about 10 o'clock that day, and, you know, hanging around waiting for a second opinion. They put me on monitoring, and, you know, we didn't see somebody until that evening about, I don't know, it was probably about 7 o'clock that evening. So it was a very long day, unsure of, you know, what to do, what was best for the baby, what our options were.
Do you remember what size they were saying the baby was at 38 weeks? Or percentile? You know, guesstimate, obviously.
Yeah, no, I can't quite remember that details, but I just know, you know, just even though I had managed my diet, I had managed gestational diabetes with my diet.
Your diet controlled?
Yeah, I know they did initially suggest insulin, but I was able to overcome all that. Yeah, there was always, I do just recall them always being concerned, you know, gestational diabetes equals bigger baby, which actually, in my case, was complete opposite. I had a baby, because it was a breech baby, I had cesarean. I wasn't given an option.
So the second specialist you saw said that they agreed with the first person that you saw?
Yes.
At the same hospital, probably in the same team.
Yeah. So, I mean, at that point in time, you just have to go with, you know, at the end of the day, you want a safe, you know, you just want a healthy baby. So, and so we went along with that. Like I had one day, literally the Thursday, just running around, going to the shops, grabbing whatever I thought I had needed. Yeah, this is a bit of a funny story. Because we've got a bit a Thermomix. We were using up all our veggies, making veggie stocks right at the last minute just to make sure. I recall that was like the last thing we had ever done, and it's a bit of a laughing joke now that, you know, baby is about to arrive, and that's what we were doing in the kitchen. But yeah, it was a bit of a traumatic kind of experience, just because it just was unprepared and unsure of, you know, what to do. But yeah, when the baby did arrive, I do recall I felt like maybe the midwife was a little bit flustered, and I had previously heard in hospital classes that with gestational diabetes, if when they do the foot prick test, the blood test, if it came out of the range that, you know, to provide more breast milk to help reduce it down, but the midwife just recommended formula. So I wasn't really happy with that, and, you know, in hindsight I probably wish that I had, you know, continued to try and, you know, breastfeed more to see.
So he had the heel prick and it came back with low sugar levels?
Yeah, that's
okay.
right.
Yeah, okay. And then the midwife who was working at the time suggested that you give the baby formula and didn't give you the option for colostrum and that sort of thing.
Yeah. But I do recall hearing another midwife when we went to the classes, you know, suggesting, you know, that's something you can try. So I was a little bit, you know, annoyed that, you know, I guess at that time, you know, we didn't try again. But yeah, because I feel like my little one, there's a few factors that I felt like he had a lot of gut issues, and, you know, something like that could have contributed. The other thing that I wish, you know, going back in hindsight and things that I had learnt in the meantime was about seeding, the seeding process, which, you know, was never suggested, never, you know, informed of, but you know, learnt how much importance that is now. So yeah.
And just for everyone listening, seeding is a process where they swab the vaginal canal and then they put that goodness on the baby's face, and that's what they would normally be born with if they're having a vaginal birth. So the option is always there most of the time for women having a cesarean section as well.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, you know, you put so much time into a birth plan. I didn't feel like anyone really, you know, took any notice of it. And that, like, for example, you know, we wanted to keep our placenta, but it was suggested by the doctors to ask to keep the placenta so they can do further testing. And I had mentioned that, but when I just happened to remember it while I was in theatre, and I said, oh, you know, have you kept the placenta? And it was just told, oh, hang on, maybe not, we'll just go check the bin. So, so, yeah, there's, you know, a few things like, you know, you hope that, you know, by writing it down or by saying, you know, it would be followed through, but you kind of had to kind of still take some control of some of the decisions you wanted, just to ensure that they were followed through.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And how big was he born? And the fact that you had a boy, so you had a baby boy who was born, and how big was he?
Yeah, it was a surprise birth as well.
Awesome.
We didn't know it was going to be a boy, so that was very exciting. He was 2.79 kilos, I believe.
A tiny little baby.
Yes, so not even at the 3 kilo mark. And at 38 weeks.
And so then you had the baby. How did you feel at that moment, you know, in the cesarean? how were you feeling, mindset wise and, recovery wise in the next couple of days? How was your breastfeeding journey? How was your mindset? How was your recovery?
So from what I can remember, I'm still suffering from baby brain, but what I can remember, it was very confronting, as a newborn mother. Just, to even rely on somebody else. Obviously, a cesarean does take a little bit of time to heal itself. I do recall, a couple of days later, just sitting in my room, just, bawling my eyes out. And it wasn't that I didn't love my baby, and, but it was, I guess, the identity shift of realizing, oh my God, this is completely new to me, and this is going to be my life. But part of me was kind of still holding on and wishing I had my old life back. You can't really move too much in the healing process. So that was, a bit different for me to just rely on others. But it was a good opportunity to slow down. We had a few more tests and things to follow up with. So, it wasn't too long that, we had to go and do another hospital visit and, the doctor appointment and all those kind of things. So, I do recall, the first time we got to even go to like the supermarket, it was just like, oh, freedom. But our journey has been, it was full of learning. I probably did too much Google searching. I felt that was probably not very helpful at the time, because it did make me stress out. And I guess in terms of breastfeeding, I did struggle initially in terms of milk supply. So, we did go through a journey of low milk supply, and then trying this, trying that, getting all sorts of different suggestions. My son, he was deemed to be failure to thrive. I think that's the term that they use, because he wasn't putting on as much weight, I guess, in comparison to the curve, the average curve. But, later on, when I was speaking to somebody else, he's, they said, he's happy, he looks healthy, you're a small person. So, in terms of the comparison curve, wasn't really, relevant to me.
Yeah.
But I guess, that doesn't help, with stress levels and, just wanting.
It's like very concerning for a new parent, a new mother, when they're told that their baby's not meeting, the requirements, and they've got this guideline that they have to follow to do their job. But often, we're not looking at the individual, scenario, and not able to, look at that and see a healthy, happy baby, which, makes it very hard for new mothers to be able to make an informed choice on what to do next.
Yeah. So, in terms of like expressing, and, there was just, a lot of
stressful,
a lot of things going on, and, you just want the best. I mean, we did try, I wanted to have an all natural kind of process, in terms of things I tried. I ended up trying Motilium, medication, but I just didn't feel it was right for me. So I did try other natural options. I was questioning about formula. I didn't really want to go there, but, I just felt, okay, this is kind of the last straw. And the formula, actually, my baby didn't actually take the formula. We tried like 2 or 3 times, and he just would not drink it. And later on, several months down the track, I found out he had dairy, egg, and most nuts allergy. So, I mean, the formula that we had bought was, in terms of allergies, it wasn't the right one anyway. So
Sure.
it gave me an opportunity to, just continue my breastfeeding journey. I did attend the Australian Breastfeeding Association meetings in the local area, and that was really helpful in terms of just feeling normal, feeling supported, feeling like, this is your goal and, how you can achieve it. And I ended up breastfeeding my first son for about over 1 year, so about 1 year 3 months, and when he was 1, that's when I returned back to work. So I did a bit of juggling of working and breastfeeding at the same time. So for something that I potentially could have given up, with your determination, and it was a beautiful kind of bonding experience. Even when I was busy at work, that morning and, evening kind of time together.
Yeah.
And, I had my fair shares of different things happening. Like, I think it was the first time I had, I don't even know what it's called, but a milk thistle, milk spot, which was very painful, and, kind of went to the doctor and tried this and tried that. So it's not I guess everyone feels like breastfeeding is like a natural kind of process, but it does take
challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, it does take determination, persistence, and a whole lot of other things, like even looking after yourself nutritionally wise. But it's such a beautiful gift that you can, for me personally, I know other people's journeys are different, but for me personally, it was something I couldn't quite understand when I went to midwife's appointments, the focus on breastfeeding all the time. And, everyone kept asking, are you going to breastfeed? Are you going to breastfeed? And
during your pregnancy?
Yeah, during my pregnancy. And I just, I would be just saying yes, and I couldn't quite understand why, but I understand it's, a personal choice, and, sometimes it's not always that easy. I guess.
I find it interesting that they ask that question, but then I find that the support afterwards is quite limited. So there's a big force through, this is my experience, through pregnancy, are you breastfeeding, you're breastfeeding. And then there's not really much support on, educating women to breastfeed, or, really encouraging, that this is a learnt skill. And then afterwards, giving so much misinformation and, so much stress, like baby's not thriving and all these issues that are happening that so many women aren't supported with. Obviously, this is another session for another time. Breastfeeding is another passion and project of mine. But yeah, it is a wonder, that's for sure. So you breastfed for 1 year and 3 months. Congratulations and well done. And then
Thank you.
At some point in your journey, you've decided to go and have another baby. So tell us a little bit about that journey and, how that went along in that pregnancy and, where you ended up.
Yeah, so I always knew my family, I wanted more than one child, because my husband's a single child and I'm a family of 4. So just in terms of personality and character building anyway. So when we found out we were pregnant with my second son, it was very exciting, because in between I did have another miscarriage. So it was kind of, treading on waters at the initial stage. But yes, this time around I was determined to do things a little differently, make sure I was more informed, more educated about my choices. And I also wanted to just feel like empowered and confident. So yes, I wanted to from my first pregnancy where I did zilch nothing, this time around I actually tried a little bit of everything, hoping that, something was going to, help us prepare. So my husband and I did a hypnobirthing course, which I actually found out through one of your video series. And it had been mentioned to me before, the word hypnobirthing. I really didn't know too much about it, but when I heard about it, it just felt it was right. And I'm so glad that I did it with my husband, because I felt like we did this pregnancy as a team approach.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and he's kind of a person who learns by listening and doing. So us reading books and that wasn't really going to work. So I kind of did some prenatal yoga, did different natural therapies towards the end, had a bit of acupuncture, did a bit of reflexology. I joined the postpartum journey into motherhood group and initially did a mindset challenge. So all of these things, I think, really helped, not in the I guess everyone has an ideal birth, but at the end of the day, it was the preparation to get there helped, keep calm and focused. And, it was really kind of like a beautiful kind of experience that, we watched birth videos together. My son, he was giving me these little light massages as I was on an exercise ball. And, now to try and find time to do any of that is like non-existent. So it was, looking back on it, it was, a special bonding time, for all of us. Him just putting, cream on my tummy, rubbing it in. So I guess I went into the second pregnancy much more informed, which helped me when I was having discussions with health professionals about, what I wanted. And one of the things that I was determined to have was a natural birth, because I never got to experience labour in my first birth. So I just, wanted to do things more naturally. And there was
Did you go back to the hospital, the same hospital, or what was did you go back to the same hospital?
So I did go back to the same hospital, but instead of doing share care with my GP and midwives, which ended up being hospital appointments anyway, I did midwives appointments, and I requested it to be in a community centre rather than going to the hospital, because for us, the travel, the parking, the waiting around was a real inconvenience.
It is.
And especially because I was, I had returned back to work part-time. And plus, in a community centre, I had heard that you would kind of get a bit more consistency with a midwife versus, hospitals, it was any random midwife. So even that journey itself, that was a bit required advocating a couple of times, through my doctor, ringing the hospital, then making an appointment at the hospital. And I said, I wanted a community centre. So it took about 3 goes, and me being persistent with it, to actually, and I did eventually have all my appointments at a community centre with a midwife. So this time around, because I did have gestational diabetes the first time, I actually had to go get checked up a little bit earlier, at I think the 20-week mark. And fortunately I was cleared for that, so that was a bit of a relief. But I did want a couple of things to negotiate around, and one of those things was I didn't want to have a cannula. I just felt that was, having something in my hand was going to be, stressful. And my plan was, to do like a hypnobirthing, active birth and, water birth if possible. So I didn't feel that was going to be conducive. And because this was a vaginal, like a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean, I had heard about them, putting you on a monitoring belt, which I guess in comparison to what I wanted to do with movement, would restrict me.
Yeah.
So, those are the two things in particular that I, wanted to discuss and negotiate around.
So you wanted to have like fetal Doppler monitoring, intermittent monitoring rather than continuous with the, the straps around your belly.
Yeah. So when I did have my appointment at 36 weeks with the consultant doctor, I did bring up those two things. I had spoken with my midwives, and I guess they obviously were quoting, hospital policies, and, just asked me to discuss it with my, with the doctor. So I did bring it up. I did have my husband with me, and we did have, a bit of a plan of, how we were going to go in it. I was a little bit really nervous actually before that appointment, because we knew that it potentially wasn't going to be an easy conversation, because we would be going against, the recommendations. And I do recall being in the hospital and actually messaging you at that time, just kind of saying, this is our plan. These are things we want to negotiate around. And I think you messaged me back and just kind of said, you don't need permission for these things. That, you can, it's your body, your baby, your birth. And gave some research that, it's not the only way to do things. So I think having that kind of inner voice inside me just helped kind of feel a little bit more empowered. And I think it's really important, they are the professionals, and even though we might have an idea of what we want, being just respectful about it, listening to, because they have to tell you the pros and the cons, so just listening to that, and, also providing, your decision making around things. So we discussed our previous birth, we discussed things that had happened, and we had done a little bit of research, and from the information from hypnobirthing, reading stories about VBAC online, watching videos, and yes, so we were able to use that in our conversation. The doctor just kind of mentioned to us, it's their recommendation. And I said, this is what I would like. And she said she would need to speak to her senior doctor. I said, yeah, that's fine. And the senior doctor came in, and I was gobsmacked and surprised when they said, with the cannula, no problems. I didn't need to have it. And they would put that on my notes. Yeah. And because if it didn't go to that second level, we would have accepted that, their policy is, because I was a VBAC, cannula in straight away, just in case. So that was a little win for you. Yeah. And then the second one, about the monitoring, intermittent monitoring, the senior doctor explained the reason why they have continuous monitoring, and that, you know, if I wanted a water birth, that they do have wireless systems around. So, you know, having the monitoring system, you know, they wouldn't allow me to have a water birth unless I had that. So, you know, that was where I, you know, met them halfway in the middle, and I understood where they were coming from. And I guess, you know, if my idea of having a water birth was going to go through, then, you know, I was happy to meet them, have the continuous monitoring wireless system. Yeah.
Because you weren't left with another choice, unfortunately. So, you know, you're left with compromising, aren't you? With, you know, and that's the unfortunate situation. But from what I understand, you were happy with that. You know, at least you'd won something, and you left feeling. Well, you can tell us how you left feeling.
Yeah, I felt really empowered, because I guess talking to authorities, you know, medical authorities, you kind of felt, you know, you need to, you know, practice everything, you know, you need to follow through with everything they say. And but it's not until you actually ask or question, or you provide a different viewpoint, that you actually hear or another side to the story, or open opportunities. Like, if I just kind of went in, I would have just accepted everything they've said, and maybe had left, you know, not so happy, like, to the fact that they said, yeah, it's fine not to have a cannula. I wouldn't have got that in my first level conversation with the doctor. It was only when it went further down.
You're able to advocate for yourself and be a voice, and, you know, make some decisions in your birthing process, you know, whereas, you know, if you didn't think about that, you know, if you didn't even do that, you wouldn't have even known you had a choice to be able to advocate for your choice.
Yeah. And I, you know, was able to, you know, as an evidence for myself, bring out the fact that I did have a lot of the other risk factors reduced, because, you know, I didn't have the gestational diabetes. You know, I did, you know, I had previous scans to show that the scarring was all okay. Yeah.
And so you're 36 weeks, you leave that appointment. Do you have another appointment at 38 weeks, or are you going back to your midwives?
Yeah, well, at that appointment, they did mention having another growth scan, even though they said, you know, the baby, you know, you're small and the baby seems small, but, you know, just as another, you know, check. And I just kind of said, yes, okay, but never got actually, I don't even recall actually making comment around it, but I never actually got any scans for it. So I thought, okay, just, you know, leave it and let it go. And when I did get a phone call a couple of weeks later from the hospital, just, you know, about booking the scan in, at that time I had decided that I didn't want to go for another scan, because, you know, everyone kind of, there wasn't really anything to indicate that anything was going wrong at the moment. You know, heartbeat was normal, midwife's checks, you know, everything seemed to be normal. So I did actually deny that scan, which was completely, I was surprised that the person at the other end said, okay, that's fine, and that was it. You know, I was kind of expecting them saying, oh no, the doctor said, or, you know, I don't know. So that was empowering you know, in itself, to actually decline the scan. And at that appointment, the doctor had also mentioned having a stretch and sweep at 38 weeks, which I, you know, really didn't make a comment on, and just kind of let them say it. But in my head, knew very well that I wasn't going to be doing that. And when I did have the 38-week appointment, obviously it's on the file, the midwife was pretty good, actually, and, you know, had mentioned, you know, that was a recommendation, and I said I didn't want it. and she, just rang the hospital. Obviously, they had to provide the, hospital policies and reason why. But she, respected my decision, and they kind of just said, a couple of different options, in the following weeks, if things, if baby hadn't arrived, what they would be doing. So that was another, I guess, a point where I advocated for myself and was able to come out with an outcome that, I was happy with.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, why stretch and sweep at 38 weeks with a smaller baby? What's the urgency to get baby out? Because 38 weeks is the start of your, due date time. So, the recommendation is 38 to 42.
Yeah, I think with VBAC, they don't like you to really go over. So, I wasn't quite sure.
So 38 weeks, you had your appointment, you declined a stretch and sweep. They recommended some other things for later on, but you had it in your mind that, we'll deal with that later. And did you have another appointment coming up anytime soon?
So I did have another appointment at the 40-week mark,
Sure.
which I never, where they were going to talk about the other different options. But that never actually eventuated, because I had my bub on the 40th week. So on his, estimated due date, which is quite exciting, because I think I read somewhere with, that's only like 3% actually arrive on their day. That birth, I never experienced any any labor or anything leading up. So it was only 2 days before he was due. I remember it was Father's Day. I remember seeing a little bit of mucus plug, didn't really know too much what it was about. And then that evening had some mild cramping. I didn't really sleep that night, which I probably should have in hindsight, maybe because I was just too excited, thinking, oh, okay, things are starting to move. The next day, we really didn't think too much of it, but fortunately my husband did stay home that day, because I did have a bit of more cramping, and I had heard of these Braxton Hicks, and I heard that it could be a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and I thought, oh, maybe it's this.
And I actually remember you messaging me and saying, because we had a couple of ladies in the group who were due around the same time, and you said that you were having pre-labor, and then I said, okay, we'll just go to sleep and have a rest. And then you said, I can't sleep, and I was like, it doesn't sound like pre-labor. I was thinking to myself, oh, I think she must be in labor. You were just, I was just like, oh, we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, well, it kind of, and actually, I don't even know why. I didn't even actually research, even though I had done, hypnobirthing course, that was at 20 weeks. And, even though I had watched birth videos, maybe they were probably a bit earlier on, and towards the end, I don't know, I didn't even research what labor was like again. And so afterwards, when I was reading people's labor stories, I was like, oh yeah, I experienced that, but it was probably a good thing in hindsight, that I really didn't know what was going on, because it lasted a little bit. I had a little bit of some intense kind of feeling for a couple of seconds, and I was okay. But I guess it kind of grew a bit stronger towards the evening. Fortunately, my mum took my other son, I was, I thought I'd try and watch a movie and fall asleep. That didn't happen. I tried all sorts of different ways to sleep on this exercise ball on my bed. I just remembered doing all sorts of things just because I thought, I just need the rest. My husband actually, I said, oh, look, I need a bath, because, I thought, water, calms me down. and he actually set up the bath. And it was so beautiful. I was so surprised with, you know, like a dim light candle, lights off, which was, you know, the ideal kind of, you know, kind of labour preparation. But unfortunately, I just needed to be on my all fours. Like, it wasn't even. And so, yeah, I just remember having lavender and just doing all sorts of things. One thing I do wish I had the car packed, and everything that I wanted to labour with at the hospital, I had it all packed in the car. So in hindsight, you know, it would have been nice to be able to use a lot of these things that I had prepared, you know, positive affirmations. Even though I had them in my house, you know, there was a specific pack I prepared for the hospital. You know, little fairy lights and, you know, heat pack and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it would have been nice to actually, because I ended up labouring at home, to use it at home.
That's probably a good recommendation, actually, having, like, you know, something packed in your bag ready to go to the hospital. But because so many women labour at home for a long time before they go to hospital, it's good to have, you know, an area set up ready so you can labour and have those tools as well. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, so that was something that I kind of, you know, going back, you know, prepared all this stuff, and, you know, it was actually used in the end. But my plan was to stay at home as long as possible, because, you know, I had read that, you know, once you kind of hit the hospital, you know, obviously a change environment, things could, you know, slow down, or, you know, more interventions could occur by going in early. So my plan was always to kind of hang out as much as I could. And yeah, so as, you know, the surges, as contractions kind of grew in intensity, and we had a few phone calls to the hospital in between. You know, we had a lot of blood loss and didn't realise that was normal. And then towards the end, I recall being in my bed and I heard this pop. And I was like, what was that? And my husband looked and he's like, I think your water has burst. And luckily we did have, you know, plastic sheets underneath my, you know, my sheets on my bed. So, you know, yeah, so we rang the hospital, and I know once your water had burst, you know, you had maybe 24 hours to get to the hospital. I wanted to go for another bath. They recommended not. So I said to my husband, I just need to go in the shower. So I went in the shower, and we kind of were making a decision. Do we go to the hospital now? It was all ready to go packed. Or, you know, are we still waiting it out? And we had a few minutes, and my husband just kind of said, you know, whatever you want to do, you know, I'll just follow. You just tell me what you need to do. And, you know, he had been putting acupressure points on me. He probably wasn't as present as I would like him to have been in the last day. He was kind of doing last minute things himself. But, you know, when I needed him, you know, he did, you know, provide, you know, some relief. So when I was in the shower, you know, I guess, you know, prior to, you know, I remember thinking, you know, I can't do this anymore. And I just had to look in the mirror and just kind of change my mindset and kind of have, you know, some positive affirmations, you know, the things that I've been talking to myself just to get through it. And then I said to myself, oh, yeah, it's, you know, I need some help now. You know, I don't know what we're doing. We better get to the hospital. So kind of getting ready to the hospital, and then, you know, halfway getting ready, I just said, I just need to be on my all fours. And prior to that, you know, I had the urge of going to, you know, the bathroom, the toilet, thinking, no, don't happen now. You know, I need to, you know, get to the hospital. But I have, in hindsight, I have no idea how I would have even lasted the 20-minute journey to the hospital in the state I was. It was.
What was it? What did it feel like for viewers who are, audience who is listening?
Oh, it felt like
you've never been in labour before.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you? Do you remember?
It was very sharp and intense. I don't know whether I would call it pain. It wasn't really pain for me, but it was just really sharp and intense, a bit of like a stabbing feeling. I actually had the vision or idea, I guess, to, calmly breathe through all of this and, be in control. It was quite the opposite for me. I actually was, which is probably a good thing, howling my guts out in terms of, what a typical movie labour was. So I didn't actually think I would be in that way, but I was towards the end. But in between, I was able to breathe and use, some of the tools that I had. So it wasn't a scary experience, but there was still an element of unknown of, what was happening. But I think because I also had in my head the things that I wanted to do and make sure it was set up the way that I wanted it, that kind of, that strong advocacy, being confident, helped where we were at. Yeah. So when I finally was on my all fours, my husband just did a little bit of a check and he said, I think I can see some black hair actually. And I guess I don't ever recall being scared by it. He just calmly rang, emergency services, and they were just on the phone with us and, was talking through the whole process. And, I remember, saying, oh, can I just go into the shower? And they said, no. I remember my husband even making comments, you've got this, you can do this. And part of my brain was going, oh my God, this sounds really unusual for my husband. But, it was kind of really, thank you for saying it. It was kind of, uplifting at that time, actually.
Very supportive.
Yeah. And he actually just documented the whole, whatever he was doing, as baby was coming out. And there was one point where he did see a bit of the cord, around, the arm and neck, and he remembered hearing that the cord was actually elastic. So he calmly, with the guidance of the emergency service, was able to take it around and out. And I actually recall there was kind of a two pushing kind of process or bearing down for me. The first one was it was like an intense ball of fire. And the second time it was quiet. I was actually just practicing the breathing technique, because we had learned a different style of breathing technique to bear down, to kind of push down, and which I had been practicing every time I was in the bathroom in pregnancy. So all those kind of tools, leading up, preparing, helped in the end. And then paramedics came about 5 to 10 minutes later. And when they did come, I didn't even know whether it was a boy or girl. It took me like 10 minutes to work it.
The baby was born at this point? So your husband caught your baby?
Yeah, he caught my baby and put baby underneath me. I was obviously still in shock. I was, I was shaking, but, still conscious. When the paramedics arrived, they, put something warm around me, gave me baby, put straight to skin on the breast. Yeah, and then it occurred to me to say, oh, do I have a boy or girl? I got a baby boy. You know, I've now got 3 boys in my family. But they did ask me, you know, about cutting the cord, and I already had written on my, you know, birth plan, and I was, you know, very determined to have delayed cord clamping, and so I knew what that meant and was able to say that, and they were surprisingly happy with my decision. I was surprised they never gave me that option. If I didn't know any better, they would have just cut the cord there and then.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I declined was having the injection for the placenta to come out. Is it syntocin? I'm not quite sure the name.
Yeah, it's a synthetic version of the oxytocin. Yeah.
And I indicated that I, you know, wanted to, you know, try and birth it naturally. And they were happy with, you know, my decision around that. So it was only because I knew these things that I was able to speak up for it, because they never actually gave me that option. And, you know, we did get the ambulance report later on. So it was actually really interesting to read that, you know, patient declined, blah, 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 blah. And I felt really empowered to actually read the word, you know, that actually, I didn't realize it at the time, but, you know, that I did actually decline it. And, you know, it was, in the end.
You were in your power, weren't you?
Yeah.
Birthed a baby on your, you know, you just birthed a baby on your own with your husband, and you had found your voice through your pregnancy, and you knew that if you were saying no, that, you know, there was a chance that they were going to say, okay. And, I mean, that's positive reinforcement, isn't it, to continue to use your voice?
Yeah. I mean, we're so glad that we had it in our home environment anyway, because, you know, it could have been this is all happening at, you know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning it could have been on the side of the highway, cold and freezing. So it was, you know, nice to be, you know, in our own environment, and we had, you know, all the things that, you know, our home comfort. And, you know, in the end, I did end up having that injection to release the placenta. And that was a bit of a difficult decision at the time at the hospital, because, you know, it had been over an hour. And hospital policy was, you know, that if it wasn't over an hour, you know, there was that they would give the injection because of high risk of blood issues. And so, you know, my husband hadn't arrived because I went in ambulance. My husband hadn't arrived at the hospital, and, you know, they were asking me to make these decisions, and I asked to wait until my husband had arrived, which initially they said yes, but, you know, they were starting to become impatient themselves. But luckily they, you know, I needed another viewpoint, because I wasn't obviously in a state to actually be thinking about, you know, what was the right thing. In hindsight, I kind of, even though I wanted a natural birth and a VBAC, and these are things I advocated for, and I was aware of other options, but I hadn't really researched too much into it. So I guess, you know, when you're put on the spot and having to make decisions quickly, I found it a bit challenging. Also, I had a third degree. Yeah.
And I just wanted to say something about that placenta as well, because, you know, when you had your baby, you had an undisturbed birth. You know, it was you and your husband. And then when the emergency services came in, that was people coming into your energy and the energy changing. And so that all impacts, you know, you delivering that placenta as well, being able to do it naturally. You know how you said when you go to the hospital, you know, it can stall labor. The same thing is for the placenta as well. And so the best way to deliver that placenta, you know, within a dually time is for the woman to be left not having to answer any questions and just relaxing, bonding with her baby, not being stressed or anything like that. That's the best way to for that placenta to come down. So it's not a surprise that your placenta didn't come within the first hour.
Yeah, and I did ask, or also being in the ambulance, bright lights, and
exactly.
not being around. And I did ask the midwife, is there some other ways? She did mention, there's could be some different birthing positions, but it wasn't. She just mentioned it, and I guess at that time I really didn't know what was. At the end of the day, I guess we were just so glad that we just, baby arrived healthy and safe, and we made the decision
for yourselves in that time. Yeah, definitely.
And I didn't realise that I had a 3rd-degree tear at that time as well, and
which is common, by the way, because of, I just want to mention this for people listening, because of the oxytocin from a natural birth that you've had, you're not feeling that tear a lot of the time until someone mentions it to you, and then that's when you can realise, I can feel the pain there. It's kind of like a natural thing stopping you from feeling that pain.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't even recall being in pain, actually. Yeah, and so I guess, making decisions at that time, about going into surgery, that was a little bit, because I had read something about, sometimes it's better to tear naturally than, it'll heal better, but that might be, 1st and 2nd degree. Yeah, I'm not quite sure of the details at the moment. So anyway, I ended up having a cannula because I had to go into surgery. So I think it kind of, even though you have these ideals and things that you want, being flexible with it and accepting whatever turn your birthing takes, and just taking it one step at a time. But
did you have the epidural when they were stitching the tear?
Yeah, so up my spine, the spinal fluid. Yeah, so it kind of went from a very natural birth to towards even things like having antibiotics for the next couple of days. I was towards the end of my pregnancy, I did become unwell with the flu-like symptoms, and avoided antibiotics, and did a lot of natural remedies, and just to find that I done all that work and I ended up having to have antibiotics. But someone mentioned to have prebiotics at the same time. So it was kind of just accepting that these at that time that was the best choice that for my body, and just kind of going along with the flow. Yeah.
And how long were you in hospital, and how was your postpartum period with your second baby and breastfeeding and your mindset and everything?
So breastfeeding for me was it was an easier journey this time round. Maybe because I wasn't as stressed as much, or maybe things I kind of implemented earlier just in terms of diet. It's been a smooth journey. I mean, it was still tough. We actually forgot how to look after a newborn, and it still was a tough initial journey, even just to have to latch baby on, and baby's still sleeping, and how to wake him up, and it's not perfect. I mean, I still have a bit of low milk supply, but the journey was I felt more confident in the journey, even though I couldn't quite do everything how I could in the first birth, because I had like a toddler son, running around. So my ideal kind of little breastfeeding pack beside my my chair
Mm-hmm.
with goodies and stuff was often taken by my son, but it was just, learning to manage around those things.
And what was happening. And what about your healing for your third degree tear? How did that go? Because I know a lot of people are interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, so for me, I had a follow-up appointment about 5 weeks later, and towards the in that first week, I was always kind of questioning, it wasn't the ideal birth that I wanted to have, but it was the feeling that I wanted to have around it, feeling blissful, feeling joyful. And I felt that in the last moments that you're always doubting, questioning, should I have gone to the hospital earlier? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? But at the end of the day, if I had gone earlier, it still could have been it could have turned out differently. So, gratitude, kind of like a mindset, had really kind of got me through a lot of that. And, I remember being at the hospital and everybody was in awe of this, that I had this home birth, the doctors, and I couldn't quite understand what they were going on about. But the fact that I never had any pain relief, and got through it, in reflecting upon it, it was like, oh wow, I did it on my own. And I really didn't realize that. So the first week was a bit of a struggle in terms of my mindset, feeling a bit disappointed that the feelings that I wanted to come from it wasn't strong enough. But when I reflect back, there was moments of those kind of feelings, and the fact that we had advocated and we had, I did, birth at home with no pain relief, and did it with my husband, who has he's already qualified himself as a qualified midwife.
I remember coming to your I remember
needs to do one more course and you become a doctor.
I know. I remember coming to your home for a postpartum visit, and he was so chuffed with himself, and he called himself the midwife. It was really, really nice to see, how he had taken pride in being a part of that journey with you. Obviously, you're the one who did all the work, and you're the one who delivered your baby, but he was very much a part of that journey, supporting you, which was lovely. And do you feel that brought you closer together, or now you've got this new experience together, do you feel like it impacted you positively in any way, your relationship?
Oh, absolutely. It's just kind of like, like I said, it was a team approach. We had done the whole pregnancy as a team. It wasn't, me just to, and I guess this pregnancy, instead of focusing too much on baby products and baby things, which, maybe the first pregnancy was about, this time it was more about, the journey. So, it definitely brought us closer together, both empowered us, and, to even, share the story, it's a proud moment, especially for my husband, to just, to say he actually delivered his own child.
And you're 7 months, are you 7 months postpartum now? 8 months. And so,
and I have to say, it wasn't easy for him. The first sight of blood, he was, he was thinking, he's like, oh my God, this is, and I just said, oh, get on with it. Like, he just had kind of switched his mindset just to get through that moment. But he was cool, calm, collected.
That's good. And how do you feel now that you're 8 months? Because I know you were really struggling around questioning, had you done the right thing, had you made the right choice, should I have had another cesarean, because you weren't anticipating or expecting to tear so severely and having to deal with that recovery. How do you feel now, 8 months? Because I want to be very honest and open with people, because I feel sometimes birth stories can be very glorified, and I think it's important to share all aspects of birth so that other women, you know, don't go on to have a vaginal birth and have a tear and then say, oh, I wish I'd known about this, you know. So how do you feel now, 8 months later?
Really know too much about a tear. You know, postpartum, about 5 weeks, when I did get a checkup, the tear, they had apparently stitched me too good. So it was actually tighter. So I've actually been working with a physio since then. Just, you know, I hadn't even heard what a dilator was. So we had been doing that kind of therapy just to kind of stretch it out. So that's been a lot of self-care, I guess, in terms of that journey. Initially, I was kind of regretful of all that, and, you know, questioning would things have been differently. But, you know, it gave me an opportunity to, you know, just focus on myself. You know, in the hindsight, I, you know, rather do the work now rather than, you know, suffer, you know, later on down the track. And, you know, this experience hasn't scared me from having another natural birth, which is, you know, if I was to have another child, you know, we're not quite sure whether we want to do that at the moment, but yeah, you know, I would be looking at my options and looking at what would be right for us at that time. But yeah, the journey in terms of the tear itself has been ongoing, more in terms of the healing process. And but, you know, going back, I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, it's still, who knows what the outcome could have been. I could have still had a tear, you know, even if I was at the hospital. It was just so fast, you know, from my waters breaking to baby arriving was literally about an hour. So, you know, yeah, and, you know, I don't go back and regret, you know, if my husband, there was some kind of things, you know, at the time that, you know, he potentially could have done, but, you know, he's obviously not a qualified midwife, but I wouldn't go back and change a thing.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad that you feel that way. And I've been a witness to your journey as well, you know, through pregnancy and also postpartum. And it's been an absolute pleasure to see you grow, to advocate for yourself, to figure out, you know, the journey that you wanted to take and stay true to that, be flexible to, you know, adapt to the situation that's come at you, and have an unplanned surprise home birth, you know, you're such a rock star. You know, you surprised the hospital staff to, you know, that you did this all by yourself, and you had a unmedicated, you know, vaginal birth at home all by yourself, is just amazing. You know, they were so shocked, and it just goes to show the strength that you have and the strength, you know, of women.
And I mean, it's not like an easy journey, like you said. You know, I have my ups and downs days, and I guess, you know, one of the things I did join this time was postpartum support. So, you know, your journey into motherhood circle. So having other women, you know, to, you know, discuss, you know, what's going on around in your mindset, and, you know, having you around to kind of put things into perspective and remind you of, you know, the journey so far has been, you know, helpful. So even though I say, you know, I don't regret any things, you know, there are days where you kind of go, oh, was it worth it? And yes, it was worth it, but, you know, it's having that mindset. And for me, you know, it was about, you know, having gratitude and, you know, reflecting and having that supportive, you know, other mothers, and having yourself as well. Just, yeah, helping, assisting in that journey.
Having the full support, no problems. It's great. And we've got some wonderful women in that group who are so supportive and understanding, and non-judgmental. And I think, having that support, whether, wherever you find it, is one of the most important keys. And that mindset, working on that mindset and doing that research and surrounding yourself, having a partner or having a sister or friend or a doula who's going to, help you reshift and put things into perspective so you can have that strength to advocate for yourself, because it can be very challenging. But, as you've shown in your story, it's possible, and you can do what you want to do in the end if you advocate for yourself. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure so many people are going to get so much value and inspiration from you sharing your story. So thank you so much for coming on, Kamal.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I hope that this episode has helped you take another step to finding your voice and confidence in your VBAC journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more women to find out more about VBAC homebirth, just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at the Motherhood Circle. See you next week. Hey, me again. I just wanted to let you know that I've just created a brand new Facebook group called VBAC Homebirth Support Group, where you can connect with other like-minded mothers who are looking to have a VBAC homebirth as well. You can find the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there.